Welcome again to another edition of Scherable. I'm your host, Bill Scher. It is Wednesday evening on my back porch, and it has been, a few days since the election's been called for Joe Biden, and Donald Trump has not conceded. Not only is he not conceded, you're still not seeing very many Republicans pressure Trump to concede. They are still generally saying he has the right to pursue his legal challenges, which is nominally true, but no reasonable person would think they would have any chance of success, and certainly no one reasonable person would think the federal government should be preventing Joe Biden from proceeding with the transition. And it's striking to me because it is atypical for a losing presidential candidate, sitting president or otherwise, retain this much loyalty after losing. And obviously, this is giving Trump some hope for running in 2024. His people have been intimating to the press that that is on his mind and may give some sort of formal signal to that end. And it just makes me wonder if the Republican Party, if elected officials in the Republican Party are being rational in their posture towards him. It does not seem rational to me to want to keep your wagon hitched to the person who just lost. And even though he didn't lose by a landslide, he still lost by a fairly healthy size margin. It looks like it's going to be around 4.5 points in the popular vote. And we had a good 5 states flip in Biden's favor: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. So not only was the quote-unquote blue wall restored, although that is granted a tenuous blue wall, you're seeing that demographic change make inroads the Southwest is almost totally Democratic at this point. And now you get your first crack back into the Southeast. So why would a party decide to stick with a person who lost the popular vote twice, barely won the Electoral College the first time, and couldn't keep it after 4 years, has not been able to stall the demographic changes that seem to be working in the Democrats' favor? Some people talk about Trump being the next Grover Cleveland, who similarly lost his reelection campaign but came back in 4 years. The big difference between Cleveland and Trump is that Grover Cleveland won the popular vote all 3 times he ran for president. So it was a pretty narrow loss when he did not win re-election. There are 2 key swing states that flipped away for him: New York and Indiana. New York was his home state. Indiana was his Republican opponent, Benjamin Harrison's home state. So it was a bit, it was a ego blow to lose your home state, but it was narrow. And the issue that the 1888 race turned on was the tariff. The Republicans were the protectionist party back then, and Cleveland was relatively speaking, a low tariff person, although not a radical about it. And the high tariff candidate won. But then a high tariff was installed in 1890, and it proved very unpopular. So not only was Grover Cleveland somebody who was the popular vote winner, wasn't a majority, it was a plurality, but still, all of his 3 races were at least the first were plurality wins. So they all three were. But by 1892, the issue that the previous election had turned on, public sentiment had swung back in Cleveland's favor. So, and the alternatives to Cleveland were tariff radicals who the wealthier faction, the donors of the Democratic Party, didn't want to see taking over the party, and so that was another factor that allowed him to claim that nomination. There's really no key issue that the 2020 election turned on. I mean, there was essentially the president's character and a sense of restoring national unity, but it wasn't like it turned on immigration or it turned on taxes or anything like that. So what would be the scenario? Let me be clear here. I'm not saying it is impossible that Trump could run and win again. Obviously, he retains a healthy amount of support in the country. He has a very intense base. Who can predict what the next 4 years are going to be like? Maybe Joe Biden's unpopular. Maybe Biden doesn't run again. And whether it's Harris or somebody else, they don't have the same bonds to a broad swath of the country that Biden does. Lots of reasons why a Republican could win in 2024. And if Trump was that Republican, he could be the beneficiary of that. But when you think about who would be the best option for Republicans, I mean, there are lots of Republicans out there, lots of people who have a shot at proving themselves, plenty of governors, plenty of senators. And why would you take somebody who not only lost the popular vote twice, has very little legislative accomplishments? It's not like there's some sort of big policy Trump got done that some other Republican could not have gotten done. Any Republican president would try to cut taxes and appoint conservative judges. That's not a sign of a particularly skilled operator. And the one thing that also comes to mind, recently was reading this book on Franklin Pierce, part of Presidential Book Club. We're up to Buchanan now. We just read Pierce. And this isn't really a Pierce-specific observation, but very early on in the book, this is written by Michael Holt, who's also wrote a big history on the Whig Party, so he's very familiar with 19th century politics. And so he said, starting in the 1820s, newspaper editors affiliated with New York's Martin Van Buren astutely outlined the danger to any party's internal cohesion that a weak external opposition poses. Any party may, quote, suffer temporary defeats, unquote, these editors wrote, but, quote, it is certain to acquire additional strength by the attacks of adverse parties, unquote. A party, quote, is in most jeopardy when an opposition is not sufficiently defined, unquote. Or again, during the contest between Jeffersonians and Federalists, quote, each found in the strength of the other a powerful motive of union and vigor, unquote. In sum, the internal unity of any party depends on the robustness, the closeness of inter-party competition. The weaker that external competition, the greater is the danger of internal fragmentation within the dominant party. So there's a bunch of ways you can interpret that, but I think it's very relevant to today. We have two parties that in many ways are defined by their opposition to the other. Democrats are a big tent party, but they are united in their loathing and fear of Donald Trump and his racial divisiveness and his authoritarian approach to government. And Republicans, at least up until this point, seem very, very unified by their opposition to socialism, and which can be broadly defined. I saw one Democratic activist tell the Huffington Post that socialism, the way it's being interpreted, is much broader than just the economics of it. It's the wrapping all the cultural and racial views that they have and fears of what Democrats are proposing. That's all becoming wrapped up in that one word, socialism. That's why they couldn't attack Biden for being Biden. They had to talk about Biden as a shell who would be steamrolled by AOC and the squad and Bernie Sanders and so forth. So these oppositional aspects are keeping these parties united, and to the extent that that's the case, that's working out well for the Democrats. They have the broader base at this point. And so to renominate Trump, I would think, is a way to keep Democrats unified at this maximum level. So even if Democrats have a rocky 4 years, even if House moderates and House progressives are still sniping at each other, faced with another Donald Trump, that might put any internal divisions aside and allow them to remain unified, keep the youth vote, keep the suburban vote, keep the college educated vote. Even if Trump made some inroads with Latinos and African Americans, by and large, Democrats still have the lion's share of that vote and is still an important part of their coalition. So the only reason why you would stick with somebody who comes with all of those potential weaknesses is irrational fear. Oh, I can't challenge Donald Trump frontally because he still has a megaphone. He'll probably, if not own his own TV station, certainly have media perches. He could encourage primary challenges to me. If he runs himself for the nomination, he could still control the party, could still control the RNC. I don't want to try to face that down. And if that is the case, that is cowardly. If you are someone who wants to run for president yourself, and there are a whole bunch of Republicans that want to run for president, they all have a collective interest in sidelining Donald Trump. And this is a beginning thing I want to get to. But there are, I think, a host of reasons why there could be internal resistance to embracing Trump. Number one is presidential candidates. Their presidential candidates could, maybe not too overtly, but implicitly and subtly lock arms to put forth a set of arguments why somebody else would be preferable to Donald Trump. Maybe they would name him by name, maybe they would speak obliquely. But if they don't do that, Trump won the nomination in the first place without a majority. I mean, he presumably would retain a healthy plurality at least, which could give him the nomination, even if there was a lot of internal opposition. So they need to do a lot more to limit his support and convince rank and file Republicans that that's a bad idea. And you may also have donors. I mean, I'm not a fly on the wall. I don't know exactly what Republican donors are thinking right now. But I think there's a very good chance that a good number of them think that they never liked Donald Trump in the first place. It's not like Donald Trump outspent Democrats. A lot of big money folks went for the Democrats this time around. A lot of them don't want trade wars. A lot of them don't want global instability. A good number of them, I'm sure, are operating on negative partisanship. I am afraid of socialism. I'm afraid that if I got behind Joe Biden, even if he is moderate, I'm putting socialists into power. And therefore, even if I have my misgivings about Donald Trump, I'm going to give money to him. But those folks, in theory, would still prefer a candidate who is not Donald Trump. Now, you might have a situation like 2016 where there were a lot of those donors out there and they could not pick an alternative to Donald Trump. They were still too diffuse. There was no particularly strong alternative. Jeb Bush wasn't strong enough. Chris Christie wasn't strong enough. Mark Rubio wasn't strong enough, so on and so forth. And they may have to be more proactive and determined to stop Trump. But they may want to start working on that project early if they want to make sure that the Trump train doesn't steamroll all of them. But there are reasons for Republicans to wish to do that, but it would require some gumption. It would require withstanding insults from Donald Trump and shaking of fists from radio talk show hosts and some rank and file Republicans. Here's one thing I don't think we know. We know Trump won 71 million plus votes. It is, in one sense, impressive considering how disastrous a presidency it was, that he retains some level of support that's got him to what looks like 47%. It might tick down to more like 46 once all the votes get counted. We've got late ballots coming in from California, New York, and Illinois that could drive down that popular vote number. But I think we should be careful not to assume that means that every last one of those votes is a complete blind Trump loyalists. There still could be a chunk of that, perhaps a considerable chunk of that, that hated Democrats more than they love Trump. I know you look at polls, you definitely see more Trump enthusiasm. You saw more Trump enthusiasm in polls than Biden enthusiasm, more positive Trump support than positive Biden support. So I'm not going to argue that the majority of the Republican vote is that way, but there could be a considerable minority, and that number could increase, once Trump is officially deemed the loser, once the votes are certified in the states, once the Electoral College vote does occur, and perhaps once more and more Republicans start feeling some ability to voice a desire to turn the page. Now, I'm not arguing optimism on this score, and I think, folks, me, I'm an optimistic sort. Yeah, I'm one of the folks who have been the most willing to say bipartisanship is still possible. I have to tell you, I'm less confident about that, today as I was 2 weeks ago. The results were not. It wasn't a colossal enough defeat of Trump to allow for a big blue wave and limit the number of Republicans one would need to get to 60 votes, and really, break the back of Trumpism. So we don't have that set of circumstances, that set of conditions, and that will make bipartisanship harder. But it certainly would be easier if Trump's voice was diminished. And if there is a faction of Republicans out there, and maybe there is not, but if there is a faction of Republicans that still wants to govern, I think they need to show some seriousness of purpose now. And this is, obviously, this is a tough circumstance for Republicans to be in. If I think they do need to show that they can govern if they want to get back in the game and maximize their ability to be a majority party again. But to be serious about governing is to work with Democrats. And then, as I was just reading about what folks realized in the mid-19th century, that doesn't work from a negative partisanship basis. It doesn't help maintain internal party unity if you're not treating the other party like your enemy. So that's a hard set of circumstances to square. And I think the only way that the governing argument wins out among Republicans is if they conclude that life in a Republican Party that is dictated by Donald Trump, not just today, but for the foreseeable future. That's not just this past 4 years, but it's the next 4 years, maybe the next 8 years. Maybe after Trump, it's Trump Jr. or Lara Trump or Eric Trump or whoever. There's no way to do business with Trump without it being about Trump. And if that's the party they want, that's the life they want to lead, well, they can make that choice. They might have to do something hard up front to be a party that's interested about governing again. And that's only going to happen, again, if they want it, if their donors want it, and if the people who want to run for president are willing to make that case forcefully, if delicately, pretty soon. Perhaps they think, well, okay, we'll ride it out for another month while Trump gets his last temper tantrum out, and then we'll do it. But they're going to have to make some decisions pretty soon about how they deal with Joe Biden, and part of this is how Joe Biden handles things is going to matter here too, because again, Republicans are very determined in creating the perception that the socialist tail is wagging the dog, and if that's not how Biden is perceived once he is inaugurated, if that's not the kind of policies he's pursuing, if he's putting forth ideas that are seen as common sense, and the public is behind them, that also puts pressure on Republicans. So and that doesn't mean that this is an easy task for Biden either. He's got to maintain the big tent. Uh, it's not every moderate policy gets a lot of people excited, and that's always the critique that the left has, that bunch of oatmeal, bunch of pablum is ever going to excite people. The flip side is some things that excite the left can be very frightening to people in the middle and the right. So can Biden find that sweet spot? Can Biden find the issues that make common sense to the broad middle of the country and make Republicans seem unserious by not working with Biden on those issues? That's another key factor that I think is going to. I can't predict rationality on the part of Republicans, but if the conditions are there for Republicans to say, look, we have to put Trumpism aside, we have to find a way to turn the page and redefine ourselves as the party. They have to internally really want that deep down, and want it deep down. Donors have to want it. Presidential candidates have to want it. Biden's got to give them the openings to embrace it. It could be that Republicans up and down just don't want that. I mean, I think a lot of Trumpers are not interested in serious governing, and they not even be all that interested in winning first and foremost. They like to win, but they might like the fight more than anything else. Fighting the secular left, fighting the media, owning the libs, pushing hot buttons and watching people's head explode. If that is the most important thing, then it will be fairly easy for Trump to maintain his dominance of the Republican Party. And I can't make predictions about whether he could win or not again, but I do think that it would be hard. I mean, he barely won the first time. When the governing didn't go so well, lost support the second time around. And I think things have to go pretty badly on Biden's watch for that to be an appealing thing for the American people to want to go back to. So it could be that that's where Republicans really are, that they're just not serious about governing, and so they're going to be this way for a long time. But that's the choice that Republicans face right now. And while I can't speak for any of them, I gotta think that a good chunk of them in Washington actually want to legislate. Actually want to do something. I mean, don't necessarily want to legislate the way Democrats want to legislate, but want to do something more than just throw rocks. And we're going to find out. We're going to find out soon enough. Anyway, I'll leave it on that note for now. If you like what I'm doing here on YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to support this financially, you can go to patreon.com/BillScher, SCHER. And I'll see you back here real soon. Take care.